Welcome, everybody. This is the panel, Can We Lead from the Library? Exploring Services to Support Research Integrity. And I'm pleased that we have a really great panel of librarians joining us today. My name is Rob Hilliker. I am the Library Relations Director for North America for Springer Nature. And just a little bit of business to get out of the way before we jump into the panel. I want to remind everybody about the code of conduct and just make sure that we all have a good, constructive, convivial time. I also want to make sure that this session is accessible because it's being recorded, and so for the benefit of people who need that. We all have a microphone. There are microphones that will come around the room for the Q&A when we get to that portion of the session. I just ask that everybody identify themselves by their name and affiliation when they ask a question, so that we have that for people who are attending when this is recast virtually. I also want to give, before we dig in, just a few slides to talk about research integrity and kind of set the table for our conversation. So what is research integrity? It is the use of honest and verifiable methods in proposing, performing, and evaluating research, reporting research results with attention to adherence to rules, regulations, and guidelines, and following commonly accepted professional codes or norms. And that's a definition that comes from the National Institutes of Health. Obviously, there are different definitions elsewhere, but I think this is a good baseline. We can also think about the research ethics, and then there's also publication ethics that come into things. So those are aspects that we can get into. As to why it's important, adhering to good integrity standards helps build trust, ensure that results are reliable and genuine, that they're reproducible and replicable, and that they build a strong reputation for the organizations, whether it's publishers or academic institutions or funders that are contributing to the dissemination of research. On the other side, there is a lot of concern across scholarly publishing with the high pressure to publish, with technological developments like AI, with changes in the publishing models that put, whether it's author pay for APCs or other forms of open access publishing models that change the incentives. And obviously we see a lot of high profile misconduct cases, but also frankly the weaponization of accusations of misconduct as well, right? So this is a back and forth that's very complicated. And then we have media like Retraction Watch and Data Sleuths, different PubPeer and things like that. So there's a lot going on in this space. As to whose responsibility research integrity is, really, I think we all have a role to play, and that's why we're talking about it here, because I think it's a topic that, as librarians, we probably contribute more than we realize, and that's part of what we're going to get into, but without necessarily framing it as a contribution to research integrity. And so part of what I'm looking to do is take this slide, which I took from one of my colleagues, and figure out, where do librarians fit in this diagram. Some of this is coming from a white paper from a survey that we did at Springer Nature, which looked at training practices around research integrity around the globe. And so I'm just going to share a very little bit of a snapshot of data, which shows that there is actually a great deal of institutional training in research integrity, but it varies widely from nation to nation. And so you can see a little bit of that here, that it's much higher, for example, in Asia than it is elsewhere. And it's particularly significantly lower in Latin America, for example. So similarly, if they have training, is that training mandatory? Again, there's a wide variation, with Japan really leading the charge there in making it mandatory. Finally, there was part of the survey was, what are the integrity-related topics that researchers most would want more training in? And so this is an interesting slide that showcases here in the US, folks are very focused on data. And actually that's true in Australia and the UK as well. That is the area where they feel the greatest need. But there's also need in terms of authorship guidance and other areas. So anyways, all this data is actually available online. If you do a Google search for state of research integrity training, white paper, Springer Nature, you will find all this. My final slide is just a QR code. This is a survey that we're doing of librarian views on the future of publisher-librarian partnerships. So I'm just going to leave that slide up. Feel free to take that survey. It's going on all this month. It is a global survey. So again, we're trying to build an understanding of what the needs and concerns of the community are. But with that, I want to transition to our panel conversation. And if I could ask each of you to introduce yourselves in turn and maybe share an example of something that you're doing at your institution that contributes to research integrity, but maybe folks wouldn't think of as being part of contributing to research integrity as a starting point. So Michelle, can we start with you since you're the closest to the podium?
Way to put me on the spot there. My name is Michelle Kraft. I am the library director for the Cleveland Clinic Health Institution. I oversee 18 hospitals in the United States for the Cleveland Clinic, library services and research. I think one of the things that we have been doing and working really a lot on is working with the researchers in all different stages of research, whether it's a systematic review, whether it's choosing the publication, whether it is helping them analyze actually journals to publish in or and conferences to attend. Those are sometimes the conferences to attend is the beginning of the research process. Sometimes they have the posters, but knowing the conferences that are legitimate to attend and that can lead to the next evolution of their research process.
All right, thanks, Michelle.
Is this on? Yeah. I'm Rachel Borchard. I'm the Scholarly Communications Librarian at American University. So I support open access, I support OER, I support research impact. Our institution has a big grant to work on societal impact, and my role is to talk about open access and the roles between that and societal impact. So one of the more boring aspects of research integrity that I support is just compliance with open access mandates, including the slew of mandates that are recently in effect and coming into effect soon.
Good afternoon. I'm Tim McGarry from Duke University. I'm the Associate University Librarian for Digital Strategies and Technology. Back in 2017, I was able to build a new team at Duke for research data management. It was originated in the libraries, still remains in the libraries, and it's been one of our leading contributors to the work that we're doing with research integrity. Initially, this was happening in parallel, but not necessarily connected to the research misconduct cases that we had at Duke that we were trying to remediate. So we had the opportunity pretty quickly to partner with the Office of Scientific Integrity, which was a new office that was created to be part of that remediation. And so through that, one thing that may be surprising for how we support research integrity is that our team teaches about 50% of the responsible conduct of research courses that graduate students are required to take that the libraries are teaching on behalf of the graduate school and the Office of Research and Innovation. So that's maybe one example of something that may be surprising.
That's a good one. Juan.
Yes, hi everyone. So I'm Juan Denzer, and I'm the engineering librarian at Syracuse University. So my role is probably a little bit different from everyone here with their really close ties to acquisitions and open access and scholarship. So what I offer as a subject librarian in research in the Department of Research and Scholarship, where we also manage the collections for the university. So I'm kind of a conduit between faculty and students so that I can help, like as Michelle mentioned, helping faculty what conferences to attend or what publications to publish in. So as far as my role, I think I offer that kind of help at Syracuse, especially like working with our open access librarian. I'm really pushing this idea of our institutional repository for engineering faculty. And when they hear about it, they're excited about it. And I'm like, yes, you should have your students pushing that stuff. So I'm kind of like, I want to say, the cheerleader for all of this.
Nice. Thanks, Juan. So, Rachel, you raised that compliance is a big issue, and I do think that's kind of cast a shadow over all of us this year. This speeding up of the NIH open access or public access mandate. Now we have Department of Energy and others coming January 1st. But I'm curious. I think one of the things that we're interested in as a publisher, and I think librarians are also interested in, is this shift from a compliance mindset to a proactive mindset where people are adopting good practices from the get-go. I just want to invite each of you to kind of speak to how we maybe bring about that mindset shift. What are things that are happening on your campuses?
Yeah, and that's why I led with the societal impact grant, because that's how I weave this together. There is always going to be point of need compliance, right? Where I didn't know that I had to, put it in the repository. Can you help me with that? What is this new requirement? But what I would rather do is get them excited about open access and what the benefits are, so that they don't see it as just a hurdle to jump through, but and actually negotiated on their behalf mandate to do so,
Right.
which is really an opportunity, right? To increase the impact of their research. So as I mentioned, when I talk about open access, I tie it very heavily to research impact, and I tie it to their promotion and tenure guidelines specifically as incentives. So yes, it's the carrot and stick model. Yes, you have to do this, but as a result, these are the benefits that you can expect to receive. And did you know it does not have to be, this is what we were just talking about beforehand, that you don't have to pay the APC. That's not what the mandate is. It's the accepted manuscript. So this can be a no cost except for labor, right? So just kind of informing them about this isn't maybe as scary as it seems, and this is beneficial to you, even though it seems like one more step that I have to take, right, to satisfy the funding requirements. But if you can get out before that moment where they're already really frustrated that they have to do one more thing, and eventually, I hope, even put that in their grant at the beginning when they're applying, right? I want to publish open access. I see the broader impact of my work, which, by the way, NIH mandates already, right? So giving them the language that they want to hear and using the terms in open access, using their own mandates to show how excited they are, I think helps make for a stronger application and helps eliminate this down the line compliance mindset when you get to the end publication.
Nice. Anyone else want to jump on that?
Yeah, Duke University has had an open access policy since 2010 that the faculty had adopted, and part of that policy was a protection for authors that actually Duke University holds a non-exclusive right to publish all articles in open access, regardless of embargo, and so they have, the university has taken a stance that as faculty, you are working, in support, with the support of Duke University, therefore Duke has the right to do that. And it has actually been a protection for our authors to be able to feel free to publish, but also know that they can then have an open access copy of that to fulfill those. And so for us, it was a slow growth of that process. And what we have focused on with our program since have been doing this now for 8 years is actually looking at impacting generational change. Focusing on the graduate students and getting them to think about their open science, open scholarship practices early on, having them be ingrained as while they're in the junior level of the research team. They become senior research assistants, then they eventually become PIs themselves. It will be ingrained in their process, and therefore it's no longer just something they have to do because they're caught off guard or they're trying to check the boxes, but it's actually something that they're expected to do, and it's part of their open processes. To the point that we have a mantra that's open scholarship is responsible conduct of research, is integrity, scientific integrity, and it really has paid off for us in dividends.
And for those of you who don't have something as cool and as awesome as Duke, where they put that in their license agreements, like myself, where we were a little bit behind in that kind of thinking, what we did was we actually created a where to publish widget that sits behind our firewall because it uses a lot of APIs that we pay for, but our people actually can start taking the information on their research and start coming up with ideas and plugging that into our widget, and it will give them ideas of places that they can publish their research. We have integrated it to where it finds journal impact factor, science, time cited, and we are working at the process of integrating our open access agreements in there. So when it spits out the list of journals, it can say, we have an open access agreement with that. Now, they would have to go in more depth to make sure really they do, but, those are some of the things that we're doing to try and educate the people to work at how they can make their research more available, open access, or if they don't have an NIH grant and it doesn't make sense for them to publish open access, and this is where I'm talking, like, not everything should be open access. This is one of those things where they can say, okay, that makes sense. I don't have to publish open access. This is a better place for my information, because I think we're starting to also see, from my perspective, some of the younger researchers who think you have to pay to publish. Mm-hmm. They don't understand that there's a traditional method of publishing. And so I don't want them to forget that avenue as well. There are benefits to both ways.
And I will just say, kind of echoing what everyone's saying, and we also do a very, I want to say, like a low impact approach to where education is key. I think it's education, like for me as a subject librarian, to know exactly what everyone's talking about with open access and different like standards, and whether it's gold policy and whether you have to pay. So we offer a lot of workshops for that. We, get vendors to come in and talk, because oftentimes, like I know in engineering, they get to a point, especially grad students, are like, I've never heard of this. How come no one ever told me this? And it's like, you really need to start from the beginning. I even try to even get undergraduates involved, because I know they're going to end up as graduate students, go on to PhD and all of that. I said, if you start them, as they say, if you start them young, you get them to understand later in life. So, and we do a lot of that with education and workshops.
Excellent. So my next question sort of looks more strictly at faculty. I'm curious if you all can speak to how current recontracting, tenure, and promotion policies contribute to some of the research integrity issues, and what kinds of changes might be helpful in terms of tenure and recontracting reform, if you have thoughts on that.
Well, we don't have tenure at a hospital. For us, it is very, we're trying to balance the line, because the Board of Governors always asks the library for a list of articles published by each department in the journals, and for that year, their journal impact factor and 5-year citation rate. So we're trying to balance the line of, yes, those are important things to measure, but then also balance the line of having people to publish in the areas that actually make sense. So we try to actually work with we've worked with our research institute to normalize the impact factors and things like that, so they're getting a clearer picture of the impact of the research that is done across our system. For us, there's no tenure. So
Right.
The doctors, the departments, it really is, do we want to keep hiring you, or do we want to, how much funding we can give for your institution or your department? So
I think we're not necessarily focused quite yet on changing the tenure and promotion standards perspectives, but we are looking at what type of incentives are driving that. Duke has been one of the, or was one of the earliest members of the Helios initiative, the Higher Education Leadership for Open Scholarship, which has been doing a lot of work to think about how we could collaboratively across higher education change the incentives for promotion and tenure. I think also we're naive if we don't also recognize that the motivation to get more grants is just as important as the motivation to be promoted or to receive tenure. And so, I have seen in, as I've studied different cases of research misconduct, that is almost a larger driver, because it's that, because the universities put a lot of pressure on researchers to increase the research revenues and grow your research profile. And so I think we need to put that side by side with alongside with the promotion tenure, particularly because the number of tenured positions that we have at Duke are limited compared to the number of researchers who are also working as PIs who may not be on the academic side as well.
I mean, I think tenure and promotion has a lot to do with this. I think, grant funding is certainly part of that, but it's also it's the expectations that are placed upon the faculty member, right? And what the consequences are for not meeting the expectations, and tenure promotion is one of those really big lines. If I don't get tenure, I get fired, right? So that creates a ton of pressure. And I think when you have that kind of pressure, it's just going to create opportunity for shortcuts, right? And that's very antithetical to research integrity. And at our university, we have not been discussing it in the context of integrity, but for us, again, it's about societal impact, and that is not something that we traditionally talk about regarding tenure and promotion. Does anyone know of any tenure and promotion guidelines that mention societal impact? Right? So we just finished a round of updating our guidelines, and every unit was asked to address, at the time, public impact. But how it looks for their unit. There was no mandate of you must have public impact or something, but what does that look like in your school? So I can say we are faculty. For our promotion and tenure guidelines, we talked a lot about practitioner impact, and this feels very meta, but presenting at a conference would be a great example of practitioner impact, right? The words that I'm saying are probably not going to get cited by any of you, right? It's not going to end up in my Google Scholar profile, but maybe it sparks ideas that inform your practice. That's practitioner impact, right? And so that's now included in our guidelines to give us ways to talk about why I'm making the choices I make as a scholar, why I'm not always trying to publish in the most high profile, right, journals in our field. So those are the kinds of changes that we are seeing. It's just expanding the opportunities to give individual faculties more room and decrease that pressure of there is only one path to tenure, and that includes lots of publications and citations, so that they can embark on different types of research journeys and describe that in ways that we haven't seen before. And maybe this is an overly optimistic prediction, but given how much trouble we are having in higher education and the pressures that are being put on higher education to show our own value, why do we exist, right? That I think the societal impact conversation is one that is increasingly being had, not only at institutions, but by funders, right? They have always wanted this and have always been frustrated. Why don't your tenure and promotion guidelines include anything that doesn't directly benefit scholarship itself? So I hope we are a trendsetter, but I think it's worth having those conversations because it does change the dynamic of what is possible, especially as a pre-tenure faculty member, and changes the incentive structure.
Yeah, I would add, we would like to add the so-called negative research, or the negative result.
Results, yeah.
Publishing those data sets are just as important, if not more important at times, and also taking that pressure off of obviously having that success, right? And those results being, again, fair, findable, accessible, interoperable, reproducible.
Yep.
Reproducing research that doesn't result in what your hypothesis is actually could benefit somebody else, and having that as an incentive could also really drive the integrity process.
And I'm glad you mentioned that, Rachel, because while we don't have tenure, as I mentioned, societal impact, I don't think we call it that, but it is
a lot of different names.
Yeah, it is important within our institution, and it is very important what memberships, what societies that our physicians and our nurses belong to, and our leaderships within, and that is heavily promoted within our institution. So while it's not officially branded as societal impact, it is very well received, and that is important. And they look at how that is guiding policy and how things are adopted more worldwide or nationwide or local for health policy and health care and doing things to treat patients and things like that. So that is something that they do look at.
And I think there are a lot of disciplines that have had this in the back of their mind, right? Of my work has implications beyond scholarship. It's just there's always been a disconnect between what my expectations are and the actual impact I'm hoping to achieve as a researcher. So I see this as an opportunity to start bridging that gap so that they don't feel like they have to dance this dance while also trying to stay true to what they think the potential of their research is outside of academia.
Out of curiosity, do any of your institutions like pursue rankings on the Times Higher Ed rankings?
Oh my God, yes.
Okay, because
there
those
ones
News
that
and World
don't?
Report.
because those integrate the UN Sustainable Development Goals. So it just feels like, have we not connected the dots yet? Like if go ahead, be motivated by the rankings, but hey, guess what? The rankings are based on community impact.
Yeah, ours, and I don't know, you mentioned the Times. I don't know about the Times, but U.S. News and World Report top hospitals.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Oh,
Right.
yeah, yeah. Just going to say that. Oh, yeah.
All right. I wanted to. I almost hate to do this for the audience, but we did. I feel like we needed to have at least one AI question. So I'm going to frame this as narrowly as possible. What AI-related research integrity questions are you guys getting at your institutions?
Oh, I'm sorry. I can start with this. Honestly, so for me, I've been heavily invested in doing a lot of my research in practical uses of AI. So I'm on the AI committee with our library, and we give a lot of workshops and sessions to students, and I can't count the number of times that they're always asking us, like, how to cite things in AI, give us examples, what are publishers, what are they using, what are they expecting? So those kind of questions really is, they often look to librarians like, do I have to cite this? I just used AI to make an outline. Where do I put that? Where do I, did I use it to correct my grammar? Do I have to cite that? And it's really complicated, like a complicated question to answer and give examples. So that's what we're just getting hit with the most, especially with undergraduate or graduate students, and even faculty that are like, really, I don't understand why, and so that's pretty much what I'm getting.
Sure.
So I can plus one from that perspective of what you just described for most of what's happening at Duke, but also in my groups particularly, we're focusing quite a bit on the data science piece in AI. How I've written some code through AI. Is this code viable to do the work that I'm trying to do? Which models are actually giving me results that are credible? So we've been trying to do a lot of R&D, our own experimentation to kind of test their looking at the consultation questions we're getting and seeing if we can anticipate some of the other possibilities. So we're trying out different models and seeing what results we're getting and be able to have experience to consult on that. How do I appropriately use the data sources that we've either licensed from vendors, or what kind of mining opportunities can we do that are both within our rights to do so, but also are going to give me results that are reputable and credible. Things like that. That's where we are for AI.
Sure. Yeah. Okay. No worries. We don't need everybody to jump in on that.
And I will say just one thing to kind of mention what you're saying. I honestly, I do get a lot of, from faculty, where's the policy? What policy do you have in place? I need to read it. What policy does the university have? And we don't have one. Like most institutions have just a general policy, but there isn't something solid, because especially engineering faculty, they're like, I want like specifics. I don't want things that are vague. I want to point at things, and I'm like, I don't have that for you.
Right.
And it's really difficult.
No, it's difficult. It's new terrain. I think everybody's figuring it out. Absolutely.
To me, I think the appropriate answer to that is your department maybe should talk about that, because I don't know if there is ever going to be a one-size-fits-all policy that's going to apply to every department and every situation. So be the change you want to see in the world.
Yeah, absolutely, and I agree. And what the problem I think that exists when I talk to other, to people from other departments, everyone's siloed, and then it's like no one is talking to each other, and it's like, and then they look to the library, and they're like, well, do you have a framework? Do you have something that we can look at? And we're like, yeah, we're working on it, and I think we should be that kind of like point place to say, okay, maybe build around this.
Sure.
But I agree, yeah, everyone should look within their own department, because computer science, engineering, they're going to have definitely their own way of thinking, as opposed to the humanities, and then might have a really strong opinion, and it's hard.
I would feel remiss at this point if I don't point out for the librarians in the audience, ACRL does have ACRL literacy and is it competency guidelines for librarians. And actually, I reviewed them recently. We have similar, AI policies at Springer Nature, and there's a lot of alignment. So I do feel like we're going to get there. We're maybe, I know there are initiatives happening at NISO and other organizations to try and give people some at least protocols to build on. But yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I just want to mention that, thank you for mentioning that, because my colleagues are always throwing that out at our AI committee. I have one colleague, he's always mentioning that, and I'm like, okay, we get it. But again, it's like, please put it,
Yeah.
let's take it and
Right.
make it our own.
And make it our own.
And we're
yeah.
not doing that yet.
And I think
Okay.
that's the benefit of a framework rather than policy.
Right.
There's always going to be context that's needed and can only be supplied at a more micro level.
True, yeah.
All right. Moving back to just more strict research integrity questions, can any of you speak to the potential library role does the library even have a role in helping recover from a high-profile research integrity breach on a campus?
I mean, we unintentionally stepped into that role. That wasn't the impetus for starting our program. Way we started our program was we recognized that we were having successful PIs not having grants renewed or new grants awarded because they were not following the new practices for data management. And so we saw a gap in the consultation and advocacy that we could provide to ensure that the university was successful in that way.
Right.
And then as we were building our program, recognize, there is a scientific integrity aspect into this, that as we are building the examples and the advocacy and guidelines for open scholarship and open data practices, we're actually helping those research teams build integrous practices themselves. And then as we were promoting our new services around, we started to get faculty who were recognizing the gaps in their own research integrity, unintentionally or unplanned. And for example, one of our the faculty who's worked with us, the most and probably the earliest, was having requests for his data that had been 7-8 years old, that he had trusted his previous research assistants to maintain, and they were no longer going into academia. And so he recognized he had lost control of the provenance of that data. That's a research misconduct, you know. And so he said, I can't sleep at night because I recognize that this is going to come back to bite me. Completely changed his practices, his workflows based on the model that we were able to consult with. Now requires everybody who works with them, whether they're a junior research assistant starting out or if they're a senior collaborator at another institution, says we're doing it this way and we're only doing it this way. And it's actually, he is a poster faculty member for us to say it actually is easier for him.
Yeah.
It's not a burden at all. In fact, it's improved the way he's done his science.
Excellent.
And while I would say we aren't as embedded as you are, the library is actually within the Department of Education, which is actually under the Research Institute. And because of our structure, that wasn't the case a few years ago. It was just the Department of Education was separate from research, but as things have changed and restructuring, we are under Research Institute, and that has actually led to greater collaboration with research as a whole, and they're really contacting us more for educational opportunities. We don't have as extensive as you guys do, but I'm really embracing that whole kind of relationship so that we can work more with them.
Wonderful. All right. So I think we've reached time to open things up for questions. So